Hello, and welcome back to the Sinobabble podcast. If you're new here, my name is Eddie. I am your host. Sinobabble also exists on Substack. If you didn't know, same name, it's Sinobabble on Substack. I write similar things to what I talk about on the podcast, but it's a bit more topical, off the cuff, serious, analytical. I don't know, it's different. Just check out the Substack as well. If you get to the end of this episode and think, wow, that episode was really good and not at all long, I have a buy me a coffee as well, where you can support the podcast and the efforts and everything that I do for Sinobabble. Anyway, let's get into the episode. Have you ever heard the phrase, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die? The story of Guo Wengui to me is an allegory, if you will. Imagine you hate someone. You hate someone so much that when one of their former best friends just airdrops by your side, abandoning that friend, and starts spreading rumors about them, you're like, oh, this is fantastic. This is my perfect opportunity to get back at this person, just for the betrayer friend to also betray you. This is the story of Guo Wengui, a mysterious, charismatic, self-proclaimed billionaire, just gets airdropped right into the middle of the enemy camp, gives you all the ammunition that you need to take them down, and then gets pulled out of the spotlight, no longer the shining star of the right-wing, China-hating, Trump-led media in America, and spoiler alert, gets thrown into prison because he is a fraudster and a scammer, just like China said he was. I feel like even though the story of Guo Wengui is now like 2 or 3 years old, you know, the guy is about to be sentenced this year, I still feel like it's a good lesson to go over once again. You know, this is a history channel, so just, you know, bear with me here. The US is currently going through its usual spiral of distrust of China, a spiral of distrust so damaging that they are willing to sacrifice their own people to their hatred. You can apply that metaphor to whatever aspect of Sino-US relations that you like. I myself will not be mentioning any words that begin with the letter T and end with the letters Arif, but you get what I'm trying to say. The story of Guo Wengui is the story of what happens when you let your blind hatred of China lead you down any mysterious murky path that you happen to come across, open up any Trojan horse that's thrown in front of you, and basically get you in debt. You can read as much or as little into this as you want. As always, we're just here to have fun. We're just here for a good time. It's really just not that serious. So just kick back, relax. If you're doing your laundry, continue. If you're driving somewhere, settle in. We're actually going to start our story today in the middle. It sounds counterintuitive, but I've got a reason for this, trust me. So we're going to use this New York Times magazine article that I found as a sort of anchor. It's kind of like the halfway point in the story. It's written in 2018, and it kind of serves as a little time capsule for our story, if you will, for our protagonist. It's hopelessly stuck in this ignorance from which it can just never be lifted, and because of that, it's so precious and hilarious at the same time. I wanted to use it because it brings up so many of the issues about Guo's past and also what he does in the present, and just sort of like encapsulates him as a person so well without necessarily meaning to. So we're going to go through major chunks of it. I'm not going to go through every single line, but I will be pulling out main parts that I want us to focus on. Also, if you've got some at home, I need you to grab your box of pins because we're going to be putting a pin in a lot of things today. The Mystery of the Exiled Billionaire Whistleblower was written in January 2018 by journalist Lauren Hilgers, who has lived in China and has actually written a book called Patriot Number One, which is about an actual Chinese reformer and activist from Wukan being a small village in the south of China that I actually wrote my undergraduate thesis about. So this is a very full circle weird moment for me. But the reason that I point out her biography is because I want to highlight the fact that she is not ignorant about China. Okay, she knows about China. She knows how to do research about China. I feel like that's very important for the way that she then goes on to tell this story. Also, if you're driving, I'm going to need you to pull over and whip out your phone right now because I need everyone to see the cover of this article. Like, for those of you who are just listening, Our leading man, Guo Wengui, is seated in what looks to be a very opulent apartment in a very opulent sort of Ming/Qing dynasty looking chair in an all-white suit, seated like a Bond villain with... The only thing he's missing is the white cap, but don't worry, because he's got a white little fluffy dog, one of those really yappy ones, on his lap. And yeah, he looks like a Bond villain. Like, I can't believe this picture was taken deliberately. I'm not sure what they were going for. I don't know if they were trying to be ironic, or if the picture was changed later on when the kind of situation changed. But I thought it was a great way to start. The subtitle of this article reads, "From a penthouse in Central Park, Guo Wengui has exposed the phenomenal web of corruption in China's ruling elite. If, that is, he's telling the truth." That is some foreshadowing at its finest. Guo Wengui has exposed a phenomenal web of corruption in China's ruling elite. The extent to which that statement is true or false, to this day, has not yet been revealed. But, let's just keep going, otherwise we'll be here forever. So let's start with the first few paragraphs so we can get the overall tenor of the article and you can kind of see where it's going. On a recent Saturday afternoon, an exiled Chinese billionaire named Guo Wengui was holding forth in his New York apartment, sipping tea while an assistant lingered quietly just outside the door, slipping in occasionally to keep Guo's glass cup perfectly full. The tycoon's Twitter account had been suspended again. It was the 5th or 6th time, and he blamed the Communist Party of China. "It's not normal," he said, about this cycle of blocking and reinstating, "but it doesn't matter. I don't need anyone." Foreshadowing. There, okay? Pin number 1, put a pin in that. Guo's New York apartment is a 9,000 square foot residence along Central Park that he bought for $67.5 million in 2015. He sat in a Victorian-style chair, his back to a pair of western-facing windows, the sunset casting craggy shadows. Guo had arrived dressed entirely in black, except for 2 silver stripes on each lapel. "I have the best houses," he told me. He picked his apartment for its location, its 3 sprawling balconies, and the meticulous tiled floor in the entryway. "He has the best apartment in London," he said, "the biggest apartment in Hong Kong. His yacht is docked along the Hudson River. He's comfortable, and anyway, Guo likes to say that, as a Buddhist, he wants for nothing. If it were down to his own needs alone, he would have kept his profile low. But he has a higher purpose. He's going to save China." Now, I have my own opinions about billionaires and their utility that I will not go into here, but I just want to draw attention to this juxtaposition of owning the best house in every single expensive city known to Western civilization and being a Buddhist. Not because he needs it for himself or his own ego or his own fulfillment, but because he needs it to bring down the CCP. Guo pictures himself as a former insider, a man who knows the secrets of a government that tightly controls the flow of information. A man who, in 2017, did the unthinkable, tearing open this veil of secrecy that has long surrounded China's political elite, lobbing accusations about corruption, extramarital affairs, and murder plots over Facebook and Twitter. His YouTube videos and tweets have drawn in farmers and shopkeepers, democracy activists, writers, and business people. In China, people have been arrested for chatting about Guo online and distributing t-shirts with one of his slogans printed on the front. This is only the beginning. In New York, Guo has split a community of dissidents and democracy activists down the middle. Some support him, others believe that Guo himself is a government spy. Nothing in his story is straightforward. Guo is 47, or 48, or 49, although he's captured the attention of publications like The Guardian, The New York Times, and The Wall Street Journal. The articles that have run about him have only offered hazy details about his life. This is because his biography varies so widely from one source to the next. Maybe his name isn't even Guo Wengui. It could be Guo Wengui. There are reports in Hong Kong. Guo occasionally goes by the name Guo Haoyun. I know that when you're writing these articles, you got a word count that you got to stick to, right? But I wonder to what extent this is deliberate on the part of the journalist. This deliberate, like, oh, we don't know anything about Guo. I don't know if she speaks or reads Chinese, but as I mentioned, she is a researcher in Chinese and Chinese, politics. So she has means at the very least, and she's writing for the New York Times magazine. So they have researchers. Yeah, you'll see again the pins. Keep the pins flowing. When pressed, Guo claims a record of unblemished integrity in his business dealings, both in real estate and in finance. I never took a square of land from the government. Put a pin in that. I didn't take a penny of investment from the banks. If you accept favours, he said, people will try to exploit your weaknesses. So, he claims, he opted to take no money and have no weaknesses. Yet, when he left China in 2014, he fled in anticipation of corruption charges. A former business partner had been detained just days before, put a pin in that, and his political patron would be detained a few days afterward. In 2015, articles about corruption in Guo's business dealings started appearing in the media. He was accused of defrauding business partners and colluding with corrupt officials. To hear Guo tell it, his political and business opponents use a national corruption campaign as a cover for a personal vendetta. So here she's touching very lightly on issues that we are going to dive so deep into. You're going to be very sorry that you clicked on this episode. She goes into no further details, you've read the whole thing, about what exactly these accusations are, who he's considered to have defrauded, which corrupt officials he's supposed to have been colluding with. She doesn't go into any of these details. So again, this is clearly an editorial choice. He's clearly being portrayed in a very certain way vis-a-vis the CCP and, China in general. I'm remembering that we're in 2018 and technically Guo has done no wrong at this point, at least not in the US. She goes on to talk about Xi's censorship campaign and the propaganda regimes that are run by authoritarian nations to give context to this, and it's all very one-sided. Of course, censorship is huge in China. I would never deny that. It's very obvious, but it is quite a nuanced conversation, and again, there's very little nuance in this article. It's just kind of giving enough context to lay the groundwork for giving credence to anything that Guo says, even if he doesn't give any actual details. Anyway, she eventually turns back to Guo. In early 2017, Guo issued his first salvos against China's ruling elite through more traditional channels. He contacted a handful of Chinese language media outlets based in the US, gave interviews to the Long Island-based publication Minjing News and to the Voice of America, a live event that was cut short by producers, leading to speculation that Voice of America had caved to Chinese government pressure. He called the New York Times, spoke with reporters at the Wall Street Journal. It didn't take long before the billionaire turned to direct appeals through social media. The accusations he made were explosive. He attacked Wang Qishan, Xi Jinping's corruption czar, and Meng Jianzhu, the secretary of the Central Political and Legal Affairs Commission, another prominent player in Xi's anti-corruption campaign. He talks about Wang's mistresses, his business interests, and his conflicts within the party. Think about what Wang had to suffer in silence back then. They slept with the same women, and Zhang knew everything about Wang. Guo said Zhang knew about Wang's corrupt business dealings. When Zhang Huawei was placed under official investigation in April, Guo claimed it was the result of a grudge. Everyone in China is a slave, with the exception of the nobility. So this is just a picture of the type of accusations that he's throwing out there. There's no real way of telling whether or not they're true. He's just kind of saying things. But it's worth bearing in mind that if they are true, if there's even a grain of truth in them, it would be interesting to know how he knows so much about these people and how corrupt they are. Just some food for thought there. Retaliation came quickly. A barrage of counter-accusations began pouring out against Guo, most published in the pages of the state-run Chinese media. Warrants for his arrest were issued on charges of corruption, bribery, and even rape. China asked Interpol to issue a red notice calling for his arrest. He was running out of money. In September, Guo recorded a video during which he received what he said was a phone call from his fifth brother. 2 of his former employees had been detained, and their family members were threatening suicide. My Twitter followers are so important, they're like heaven to me, but he could not ignore the well-being of his family and his employees. I cannot finish this show as I planned. He told his followers in a later video that he was planning to divorce his wife in order to shield her from the backlash. Guo's employees, Guo's family are all in trouble. He is living it up in the US in his Central Park apartment, best place in the world. And his wife is being threatened by the Public Security Bureau. Immediately, this is literally the next paragraph. Guo quickly resumed posting videos and encouraging his followers. His accusations continued to accumulate throughout 2017, and he recently started his own YouTube channel. He has yet to divorce his wife. His videos are released according to no particular schedule, sometimes several days in a row, some weeks not at all. He has developed a casual talkative style. In some, he's running on a treadmill or sweating after a workout. He's demonstrated cooking techniques and played with a tiny fluffy dog, a gift from his daughter. He invites his viewers into a world of luxury and offers them a mix of secrets, gossip, and insider knowledge. So there is his family and his friends and his colleagues being threatened, saying that they're going to commit suicide back home, and here he is doing fucking YouTube cooking tutorials. Like, ah, dear. So what do other people think about Guo? This guy is just covered in question marks, says Min Shin Pei, a professor at Claremont McKenna who specializes in Chinese governance. Now, if you have been a long-time listener of this podcast, you know that I've got beef with Min Shin Pei, but here he makes some points that I actually have to agree with very wholeheartedly. Pei warns not to take any of Guo's accusations at face value. The reaction from the CPC has been so extreme, however, that Pei believes Guo must know something. Of course he knows something. Like, the guy is mixed up in this. Like, you don't have to be a rocket scientist or like an analyst to understand that the only way that you can have insider knowledge about corruption is if you were there when said corruption was taking place. Okay, so what about the people who follow him, his fans, his detractors? Who are these people? His claims have divided a group of exiled dissidents and democracy activists, people who might seem like Guo's natural allies. For the most part, the democracy activists who flee China have been chased from the country for protesting the government or promoting human rights, not because of corruption charges. They tell stories of personal persecution, not insider tales of bribery, sex and money. And perhaps as a consequence, few exiled activists command as large an audience as Guo. I will believe him, Ha Jin said, until one of his serious accusations is proved to be false. Crazy take, especially from someone who's moved to America. Like, imagine moving from a country where you feel like there's no rule of law to a country where people are presumed innocent until guilty, and then you're just like, the Chinese government is guilty. I don't need evidence. Who needs evidence? Oh god. Okay, so a little bit more on Guo's political connections. We're almost through with this article. We just need to talk about a couple more things. Guo has a history of cultivating relationships with the politically influential, and the trend has continued in New York. He famously bought 5,000 copies of a book by Cherie Blair, Tony Blair's wife. Guo has also cultivated a special relationship with Steve Bannon, put a pin in it, whom he says he has met with a handful of times, although the two have no financial relationship. Not long after one of their meetings, Bannon appeared on Breitbart Radio and called China an enemy of incalculable power. Despite Guo's high-powered supporters and his army of online followers, one important mark of believability has continued to elude him. Western news organizations have struggled to find evidence that would corroborate Guo's claims. When his claims appear in print, they are carefully hedged, delivered with none of his signature charm and bombast. Why do you need more evidence? Guo complained in his apartment. I can give them evidence, no problem, but while they're out spending time investigating, I'm waiting around to get killed. This is again like one of those issues that's just left hanging. And it's almost kind of left in Guo's hands because, you know, he gets the final say. I've got bigger things to deal with. What these bigger things are and how he plans to deal with them, God only knows. This is also not elaborated on. It's like everything he says is just allowed to be left vague and just completely devoid of any substance. Like, it goes on to talk about his past, his biography, right? And it says, the details of Guo's life may be impossible to verify, but the broad strokes confirm a picture of a man whose fortunes have risen and fallen with the political climate in China. To hear him tell it, he was born in Jilin province in a mining town where his parents were sent during the Cultural Revolution. Sometimes we didn't even have firewood, so we burned wet twigs from the mountains. The smoke was so thick. He emphasizes this history. He came from hardship and he pulled himself up. That section in particular really annoys me because she says that the details are impossible to verify, but the broad strokes are all there. But in my opinion, not to be too granular, but to be way too granular about this, it's the details that make up the broad strokes. Right? You can't make sweeping claims if there are absolutely no details whatsoever to base those claims on. Like, you can't even get his year of birth pinned down, and like you can say, okay, well, he is the youngest of 8 siblings, it was the Cultural Revolution, his parents were sent down to the countryside, you know, maybe they just didn't have the records. That's, you know, that could be fine, but like that's not even a reason that's given. It's not substantiated. It's just like, you know, like, oh, he just grew up during this. He was apparently arrested during the Tiananmen Square protests, allegedly. Like, all of it is alleged. There's no records. There's no proof. There's no one else ever shows up to corroborate his stories. It's just him telling you his story. If you take away what Guo actually says and just sort of put his story, like the bare bones of his story, on a timeline, what he's basically saying is that he came up in the period of the 80s and 90s where corruption was at its absolute zenith in China, and managed to wiggle his way up to the heads of, you know, to be best buddies with the heads of several different departments at the very tippy top of the Chinese state, only to be toppled when Xi Jinping enacts the anti-corruption campaign from 2012 onwards. So that sounds to me like somebody who was corrupt and then is being undone by anti-corruption and is now trying to get revenge. But what do I know? God forbid anybody draw any conclusion other than, like, you know, this guy is like a radical dissident who's going to bring down the CCP. The article wraps up by talking about like a rally that Guo is hosting and some of the people who are in attendance there. At the barbecue, a supporter named Ye Rong tucked one of his children under his arm and acknowledged that Guo's past life is riddled with holes. There was always a possibility that Guo used to be a thug, but Ye didn't think it mattered. The rules of the conflict had been set by the Communist Party. You need all kinds of people to oppose the Chinese government, Ye said. We need intellectuals. We also need thugs. This is very much the reflective of the mindset that I feel like the United States has in general about China. It doesn't matter who's giving this information. It doesn't matter who else is trying to tear the CCP down. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And the details don't matter, only the broad strokes matter. And that, my friends, is how you get yourself into trouble. The article ends with, Guo, of course, has his own opinions about his legacy. He warned of dark times for Americans and for the world if he doesn't succeed in his mission to change China. I'm trying to help. I'm not joking. I will change China within the next 3 years. If I don't change it, I won't be able to survive. And boy, was he right. Okay, so like I said, we're starting in the middle. So that article was from 2018. We're now going to go back in time, right? So we're going to go back to around 2006 is the first mention that I can find of Guo Wengui in the media. It's the very first incident. And it's kind of small, but you see later on why this is such an important moment in his timeline. More things start coming out in the Chinese media in 2014, 2015, when he is preparing to leave the country and flee. That's when he buys his apartment in the US. Remember, he buys the apartment in 2015. So in 2015, he has already seen that the jig is up. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the scandals, some of the claims that have been made against him. I'm going to try and make it as clear as possible. It's one of these things that kind of like unravels the more that comes out. So you start with a few stories and then somebody does an expose and then somebody else does an expose. And then we end up with a very different picture painted of Guo than what the New York Times article, which is written 3 years after most of these articles come out, paints of Guo. Oh, and by the way, sometimes I'm just going to use Guo Enterprises as shorthand for his companies because there are so many bloody companies, and even I was struggling to keep up with all the Chinese names this time. So yeah, anyway, 2006. The Beijing Olympics are happening in 2008. The area around the Olympic Village is a very sought after hotspot for development companies to build different projects. So there's a place called Morgan Plaza, and it's supposed to be like this entertainment shopping mall, blah, blah, blah. It's owned by Beijing Morgan. Okay, the company is called Beijing Morgan. This is part of Guo Enterprises. It's owned by Guo Wengui. The basic issue was that Beijing Morgan had agreed to buy and develop this piece of land, but they hadn't finished paying for it. They had paid for like 15% or something like that. So the government put a time limit on it and said, hey, if you haven't finished paying by 2006, we're going to reclaim the land. So they take it back because his company hadn't paid. And then all of a sudden, the land gets returned to Beijing Morgan, right? And this is after something that the article names as the Liu Zhihua incident. Now, who is Liu Zhihua, you ask? Liu Zhihua is the former Beijing vice mayor, and he was chief of the planning permission department during this period of time. So he was a person who was in charge of allocating land to different companies during the lead up to the Beijing Olympics. And he is taken down in an anti-corruption campaign, and he is given a suspended death sentence for accepting bribes. So this is the very first mention of Guo that I can find in any media. There's like bits and bobs still talking about that story throughout the years. But the next big story comes out in 2014. And then this is just like a deluge of articles, exposés, deep dives into who is this mysterious figure, Guo Wengui. So it starts with a story about a company called Peking University Pharmaceuticals. It basically implicates its founders, a company called Peking University founder and its CEO Li You, and another company called Zhengchuan Holdings in accusations of insider trading, right? Zhengchuan Holdings, which is a part of Guo Enterprises, even though Guo's name is not on the company, but everybody basically says, yeah, this is Guo's company. Their argument is that the CEO of Peking University Pharmaceutical used Zhengchuan Holdings to buy and hold stock when it was low, and then when the price of the stock went up, sell it on their behalf so that they can make a profit of 350 million yuan. So Zhengchuan Holdings is basically arguing that they used Zhengchuan Holdings to perform insider trading. Peking University Pharmaceutical argues that no, that's not what happened. Zhengchuan Holdings had agreed to buy this stock from us because they failed to pay. We're seeing a recurring theme here. Because they failed to pay up, Peking University Pharmaceuticals was forced to transfer their own stocks as a proxy. I'm not really sure how this financial stuff works, but basically Peking University Pharmaceuticals was arguing that they were using their own funds to support Zhengchuan Holdings until Zhengchuan Holdings could come through with their funds to then buy the stock that they had promised to buy in the first place. So there was going to be a stock trade anyway, but they were basically saying that Zhengchuan Holdings didn't come up with the money, so they had to do a transfer of their own stock, and that's why it looks like they were doing some insider shady dealings. After reading several articles on this, it kind of shakes out that Li You and Guo Wengui and a few other people were kind of doing an inside deal together. There's no innocent party here. Everyone's kind of caught red-handed and then trying to blame everybody else. This company, Zhengchuan Holdings, is interesting because while it is a financial management company, it is also, surprise, surprise, a real estate company. And it acquired another piece of land called Jinchuan Plaza, which it ended up having to sell off because, can you guess the reason why? They failed to pay. They failed to pay for the land transfer fee. Now, instead of just selling the land off, because they had paid for some of it and then they could reclaim some of the money back, what Guo Wengui did was bring in another firm called Poly Real Estate to invest in Beijing Morgan, which was the original Guo Enterprises that we spoke about in 2006, so that Beijing Morgan could then claim ownership of Zhengchuan Holdings so that it would basically sell the land back to itself. One of Guo's companies managed to make a profit off of the sale of land that it hadn't even paid for in the first place. That's, I've got to hand it to him. That's some serious juice. So as all of these stories of all of these shifty dealings are coming out, more information about Guo Wengui is coming out. And people start piecing together kind of biographies of his past life. So again, he's either born in 1967 or he's born in 1968. He starts working for the provincial government at the age of 18. He's arrested around the age of 22 because of the Tiananmen Square massacre stuff. But then in 1992, at the age of 25, he is somehow made the chairman of a furniture factory, which kind of seems like a big leap to go from criminal arrested during the Tiananmen Square protests to owner of a furniture factory. But what do I know? Apparently 1 year later, he then goes on to establish his first real estate company, which is Yuda Real Estate. And then 5 years after that, this Yuda Real Estate company goes on to build the Yuda International Trade Building. At the time was the tallest building in central China. I don't know if it is still the tallest building in central China. He then goes on to establish some of these other companies like the Zhengchuan Holding Real Estate Company thing. And it's basically at this point that all of the articles agree that Guo has become some sort of like shadowy major player figure in the Beijing real estate world. Like, there's another guy called Pan Shiyi. He's like the CEO of this company called Soho China, which is like Beijing and Shanghai's largest commercial real estate developer. And someone asked him like, hey, how comes you're not buying any of like the Olympic development land? And he's like, I don't want that smoke. He's like, I don't want anything to do with that. In the early 2000s, this is where we see Guo kind of like disappear from the limelight. And his name is being removed as like CEO or chairman of all of these like companies that we have. So that's why in the earlier stories, you don't see his actual name, but people do digging to find out that he was once the chairman, or he is the principal investor. He used to own it and then it merged with another company that he also used to own. He's moving and shaking. He's taking a step back from the limelight, but still puppeteering everything. And he is now among the political elite. This much should be obvious, because one cannot simply buy land in China, let alone land around Olympic Village just before the 2008 Olympics, which is like one of the largest events to like ever have occurred in China at that time, and was super duper duper important. I don't know if you guys remember, some of you are probably too young. Basically, it was very important to the CCP that this went well, and so to just be given land, you got to have Guanxi, right? He had some connections. The more digging that's done, the more these connections are coming to the fore. It becomes apparent that Guo is very close with a politician named Ma Jian. He is a national security official who rose to the role of Vice Minister of State Security, which is basically China's like secret intelligence, like the CIA or the FBI, national intelligence and counterintelligence. So it's like the CIA and FBI rolled into one, right? This guy's the vice minister of that, and that's his bestie. So again, I don't know how he got this contact, this poor boy from like Jilin province. Despite all these details, it's all still shrouded in mystery. It's believed or inferred that it's Ma Jian who helps Guo take down Liu Zhihua, the former vice mayor of Beijing, who was in charge of allocating land for the Beijing Olympic area, because he wanted to take the land back from Guo, and so he bribed his mistress into exposing a sex tape of them, and also getting other people to confess to taking bribes from this man. It's very clear that Guo's connections in high places have clearly got him as far as he's got in this world, obviously, because that's how he knows so much about corruption in China, obviously. There's also another character called Qulong who's kind of important, but like not really. Basically, Qulong is his other bestie. They became friends when Guo fled the country for the first time, and he left his Mercedes or his BMW in Qulong's garage for 2 years, and then came back and was like, my bad, my dude. Do you want to go into business with me as a mea culpa? And the guy's like, yeah. And they're cool for a while, but then a bribery or fraud case comes up, and then Guo tries to pin it on Qulong, and Qulong then turns state witness, and then Guo basically has him kidnapped and charged with bribery and fraud and thrown into prison indefinitely. This was in like 2011. Qulong eventually gets released when Ma Jian is picked up for corruption. And Ma Jian basically admits that, yeah, it wasn't anything to do with Qulong. It was actually all Guo Wengui. And then Qulong gets released and Ma Jian gets sentenced, I think, to life in prison. It's a huge mess. I hope that was somewhat clear. Like, I hope that kind of made sense. As the 2018 New York Times Magazine article would put it, the point is not in the details, it's in the broad strokes. You can argue that these claims have been made up by the CCP, they're trumped up charges, whatever you want to put it. But if you've been accused of insider trader, embezzlement, and rape, there was a rape charge in there as well. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. You might be the problem. And the thing is as well, that going back to the New York Times article that annoyed me, is that all of these things are eminently Googleable. Like, it did not take me long on Baidu to find literally all of these stories with a simple search of Guo Wengui's name, going back, as I said, 20 years. And again, it begs the question, why does Guo Wengui suddenly have all of this insider information to impart on the US? Because he was part of the insider information, obviously. Like, the crimes that he's accused of in China are political, economic, and social. He didn't just betray the government, he also betrayed his business partners, he betrayed his friends, he betrayed his employees, people who were relying on him to make a living. He just kind of dumped them and fled the country, and then, was drop kicked into the US, and somehow got everybody to just gloss over his history by just, I guess, spouting rubbish and hoping that nobody knows how to use Baidu. And again, it doesn't really matter if you think that the CCP made up all these charges. The point is that it's very obvious that the people around Guo when he was in China didn't trust him. And as we saw in the New York Times article, people were asking for him to turn himself in or to help them. And he just continued making cooking videos on his YouTube channel. That's dealt with most of the history pins, so let's move back into the present day. We're now post New York Times, we're in 2018, the CCP has issued a warrant for Guo's arrest, and Guo is down 20 million yuan because he got scammed himself. So, I don't know, karma's a bitch. Also, actually one more thing that pisses me off about the New York Times article. There's an article that comes out that shows that at exactly the same time that one's being written, Guo's colleagues are on trial for running shell companies in his name in China. So again, he is just gallivanting around New York, giving all these op-eds to the New Yorker while his colleagues are being thrown into prison in the country that he argues he's trying to bring down. So how does Guo go from being this eccentric billionaire dissident to a member of the far right elite circles? It seems to have been sparked by this incident where in 2018 China sends security agents to visit Guo in his home in New York. This incident catches the attention of the FBI because they're like, you can't just do that. Apparently it starts sending messages that Guo is person of interest. His name apparently crosses Trump's desk, but only fleetingly. There's this 2022 New Yorker article that goes into the whole thing in more detail. But eventually around this time, he catches the eye of Steve Bannon. So in 2017, Steve Bannon is already no longer part of the Trump administration, but he's still a known, right? So he's going around Europe, he's giving his far-right speeches, he's part of the Bolsonaro election campaign, so he's still around, he's still got some influence. Obviously people know him as a media figure because of Breitbart News and other projects that he's done. Apparently Guo and Bannon meet up and bond over their mutual hatred of China, as you do. They get to scheming, and then 2 years later, on June 4th, 2020, that's right, the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, they announce the inception, I guess, of a new state, the new federal state of China. A video of this announcement is still available on YouTube. Please watch it if you have time. It's quite the sight to behold. They're essentially balancing on this boat while planes with banners fly overhead, and they're wibbling and wobbling about in front of the Statue of Liberty. And I think it's Guo Wengui's boat, the same boat that Steve Bannon gets arrested on later on. Go figure, life's full circle and all of that. And this announcement is just the beginning. So according to a 2022 New Yorker article, for all their differences in style, the two shared an unsentimental view of human affairs, a conspiratorial mindset, and a belief in the power of calculated alliances. Look how the tone has changed. Just 4 years. The media's already turned against Guo Wengui. What did he ever do to you guys? They formed a joint venture called GTV Media Group, an alternative news platform which ran Bannon's War Room podcast, dubbed in Mandarin, along with frequent live streams from Guo and his fans. The broadcast touted the Rule of Law Foundation, which Guo and Bannon had founded to reveal the Communist Party's corrupting effects at home and abroad. They hyped up Guo's business initiatives, including cryptocurrencies, G-Coin, G-Dollars, a membership group called G-Clubs, and an apparel line called G-Fashion. And I think it's around this time as well that Guo Wengui starts his YouTube channel where he starts releasing music. Again, please go and listen to some of these songs if you can. We don't have time to go into it today, but consider that my gift to you. On the air, Guo spoke constantly of the Communist Party's crimes and the hypocrisy of its leaders. Everything is fake, he said. It's pretty rich coming from him. Despite its eccentricity, Guo's network pulled in hundreds of millions of dollars, mostly from Chinese expats, who thrilled to the promise of challenging the party. Guo's platforms became popular venues for misinformation, anti-vaccine rhetoric, and the promotion of folk cures. His fashion line included a button-down shirt emblazoned with the word ivermectin for almost $2,200. As the boundary between his business and his politics faded, he made wildly unsubstantiated claims. Oh, these are the unsubstantiated claims, are they? He announced that his media venture would be a good investment if the Chinese currency collapsed, and promised investors, "I will not lose you any money." He told fans that donating to his initiatives would give them an advantage on their immigration applications. "It's very simple," he said. "If you support the whistleblower movement and you've applied for political asylum, your application for asylum will 100% get approved." What? Where does this guy get off? Like, it's so obvious of a scam that people had to fall for it. He has people so dedicated to him that they end up harassing other legitimate dissidents because they disagree with Guo, or they have just like a different approach, right? So like, this is an article in the BBC that talks about this. Guo launched what he called a punishing the traitors campaign. So funny, by the way, that he's using campaigns just like the CCP do, with like a similar title as well, because like that's obviously such like a dog whistle. People from China cannot help but respond to the CCP's call to get involved in the campaign and go down to the frigging countryside and start harassing academics. Anyway, several of those targeted allegedly received death threats. At least one was beaten by Guo's followers. Teng Biao, a dissident who fled China and is a visiting professor at the University of Chicago, was one of the people targeted in the Traitors campaign. He said that he began writing about Guo in 2017, believing that the businessman was discrediting the work of Chinese dissidents. Guo sued Mr. Deng for information, but the case was dismissed. That did not stop the attacks. For 2 months, from late 2021, up to 30 activists rallied every day outside his house in New Jersey. They were standing in front of my house, holding banners inside, calling me a Chinese Communist Party spy, and then kept filming in my house, live streaming and cursing at me and my children. His followers sent me death threats. Coco, an investor who has since turned against Guo, said she participated in a rally outside the house of another Chinese dissident, Bob Fu. Fu is a pastor and religious freedom activist who left China in the 90s. Guo accused him of being a Chinese spy. "I regret joining these actions very much. Those people are not Chinese Communist Party spies." Yeah, no shit, Coco. Anyway, the whole thing begins to unravel in 2023. The US government basically catches Guo red-handed because these schemes are just so obviously a scam. I'm sorry, but like, I know you shouldn't victim blame, but anyway, he's accused of scamming his followers out of about $1 billion. Thousands of Chinese dissidents, most living abroad, sent money thinking they were buying shares in his business and cryptocurrency. But instead of being invested, authorities say the money was used by Guo and a London-based business partner, Kim Ming-jae, to fund extravagant purchases, including expensive properties, a yacht, sports cars, risky hedge fund investments, $1 million worth of rugs, and a $140,000 piano. "I watched his live streams every day," said Coco, an immigrant who'd been living in the US for a decade. "The videos are very sensational and we trusted him completely." Like many of his followers, Coco was drawn in by Guo's opposition to the CCP and his claims to have access to dirt on senior Chinese officials. She became suspicious after investing in GTV, a media company founded by Guo and Bannon. She got invited to a WhatsApp group promising exclusive access to the tycoon and joined protests outside the home of one of Guo's opponents. She says the protesters were meant to get paid but never did. She said she invested $6,000. One of her friends apparently gave more than $100,000 in order to become a chair, a member of Guo's inner circle. Despite the vast sums of money pumped into Guo's companies and foundations, he declared bankruptcy last year, claiming less than $100,000 to his name. According to the indictment, 5,500 investors sunk a total of $452 million into GTV, which Guo claimed was worth $2 billion. In reality, it's alleged that it was a new business and had no revenue. Unfortunately, this story also kind of falls into the broader category of everything is a scam these days, and it seems like the more desperate society becomes, the deeper that we sink into late stage capitalism, the more vulnerable people become as well, the more desperate everybody is. I'm thinking specifically of all these pump and dump crypto schemes where they're obviously just meme coins, and yeah, thousands of people will jump on it just to hope that they're not the last person left holding the bag, which, you know, unless you've got insider knowledge, you inevitably will be. I think people increasingly are looking more and more for something to believe in. And in doing so, they will latch onto anything that kind of reflects even the remotest part of their belief system, or something that they can believe in, something tangible that they can hold on to, something that's like they feel can't betray them. It's very uncomfortable to watch. It's just such a shame to see people being taken advantage of over and over again, and just knowing that almost everyone is susceptible to this at this point, just because of how sensitive everything has become. And of course, this is reflected in the rampant xenophobia and policies that we're seeing enacted against China. Speaking of nothing in particular, definitely not speaking about things that begin with T and end with Arif. But people essentially want to believe that there is a cure-all out there, right? Like there's a panacea that can solve all of their problems. Like if we just get rid of China, we get rid of China's influence, we get rid of Chinese factories, Chinese manufacturing, Chinese products, whatever, we just stop them from coming in, then we can go back to being happy and competitive and thriving. I don't want to say that's a scam, but I do think it's quasi-religious, right? It's like something that people can believe in that has no proof other than your belief. All that this ideal is based on, this policy, this whatever, is this religion is based on, is the fact that enough of you believe in it to make it true. And it will be used to take advantage of people. It's already being used to take advantage of people. Whether it works or not is inconsequential, because it's already achieved its main aim, which is manipulating people into believing in it for political gain, for economic gain. Funnily enough, I think if Guo had shown up like now, like this year, last year, as opposed to reaching his zenith 5 years ago, I think he might have survived. I think he might actually have been a big player. He might even have ended up like Chinese ambassador in the Trump administration. Like, I'm not kidding at all. The hatred for China and the belief that if we can just get rid of China is so strong now that his scam would have got way further now than it did back then, when I think, you know, people weren't 100% on board the T-Arif train. He's got everything. He's got the bravado, he's got the ego, he's got the illegal funds. He would have fit right in with these people. But he's in prison now. So Guo Wengui can't hurt you anymore. Once again, take it from that what you will. I hope you enjoyed the episode, regardless of your beliefs. Once again, I have a Substack called Sinobabble. It can be found on Substack. It's late. I also have a buy me a coffee. If you enjoyed the episode, please feel free to support me. I am on social media. I don't use any of it. I'm too old and tired to use social media. Just follow me on Substack. I post the occasional note. It's very cute over there. I like Substack. We have a good time. And yeah, I will catch you all in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening/watching, and have a lovely evening.